You are now tuned into Flippin the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome all to episode 141 of Flippin the Birds. I'm Bryan Cameron, alongside my guy Zach, whose last name I will not try to pronounce on this week's podcast, but I will get better at it. I'm going to master this whole last name thing that I got going on that I just can't pronounce. We're gonna make.
You got time, baby. No worries. You got time.
But how you feeling, man?
I'm good, man. Coming off a Birds win. Dougie P coming back to the house on Sunday. You know.
The Bud Light statue himself walks.
Not only did the Eagles dominate the Commanders, but the defense finally is. We had the secondary against Minnesota, but all around the entire team is really coming together. There's not a weak link. There's things that could be stronger, but there's not a weak link. So I'm flying high, man. I can't say anything else.
You're flying high right now. You're flying
absolutely.
high. You got your Jim Jones headwear on, and you're flying high.
Hell yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, as you guys know, the Eagles did shut out the Washington Commanders, which could have been expected. I feel like I expected a little bit more from the Commanders offense. I was hitting on all cylinders with Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, and Terry McLaurin. But kudos to the Eagles secondary. I mean, we usually start with offense, but might as well just dive with the defense on this one. Darius Slay, James Bradbury, even Avonte Maddox not missing any tackles. Then you have TJ Edwards. I mean, it's so weird to say, like, this Eagles defense is actually looking pretty damn good.
Yeah. TJ Edwards becoming a complete linebacker right before our very eyes. We knew he was a very talented run defender, really since he came into the league, but he's always been a little bit slow-footed. So pass coverage, not exactly his forte. He started to surprise us a little bit this season. Had a nice pass defense against Minnesota last week. Killing it this week. Absolutely killing it against Washington, Like, it's his development, like, cannot be understated. Like, people, talk about, like, oh, where's Nakobe Dean? Why isn't Nakobe Dean playing? And, like, there's separate issues for why Dean isn't playing. His youth, lack of experience, everything like that. There's no room for him because TJ Edwards is not allowing himself to be replaced. Kaiser White, who's going to stay, but TJ Edwards is really establishing himself.
But isn't that like, all right, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but doesn't that kind of suck? Like, we've been waiting so long for the Eagles to draft an actual, potent linebacker. They did it. They got Nakobe Dean for a steal. And now TJ Edwards is lighting it up. Kaiser White looks pretty damn good. And it's just like, okay, what the hell just happened? Like, what are we doing now? Like, to me, like, I don't see myself drafting Nakobe Dean saying, like, you're playing, you're gonna ride the pony all season long because you're good. I mean, you're a rookie, and TJ Edwards is pretty damn good this season. Like, to me, it's just like shit. Like, what a predicament we're in. It's a good predicament at the end of the day, but it's just kind of like it's like the Jordan Davis drama situation with Hargrave and Cox.
Well, I think it's exactly like the Jordan Davis situation to even go to the point of, why it's not that big of a problem in my mind. So let's look at the Jordan Davis situation first. Fletcher Cox, unrestricted free agent after this year, possibly moving on from the Philadelphia Eagles. Javon Hargrave, though he, has years left, he may also be moving on from the Philadelphia. You can't say he's 100% going to be here next season. Just knowing how Howie likes to work, you just can't say that, 100%. So there is going to be a spot for Jordan Davis going forward in the future. Same goes for Nakobe Dean and the linebackers. TJ Edwards, free agent this offseason. Kaiser White, free agent this offseason. Are they going to retain at least one of them? You think probably, if all the numbers work out. But you really, don't know that you're going to be able to keep both of these guys, nor should you necessarily keep both of these guys because you're going to have to be careful with your money going forward. So
that's a fair point.
There will be time for Dean to play. It's not right now because TJ freaking Edwards is a killer, baby. So I'm more than okay with it for now.
And I think the surprising thing about Edwards' game is the pass coverage. We've known him to be a great run, great against the run. But against the pass, you know, he was more of a liability at times. And now this season, you're
Yeah.
seeing him break up passes, you know, that are thrown to the tight ends. And
Yeah.
it's such a huge leap forward. And it's so weird that this team in general, like so many players have taken a huge leap forward.
Mm-hmm.
TJ Edwards, you have Marcus Epps, you have Josh Sweat, you have Jalen Hurts, you have Devontae Smith, Quez Watkins, and so on. Like, it's such a weird thing compared to what we previously have seen from the old regime, from Doug Pederson days, to Nick Sirianni now. Like, it's, you know, I think you got to tip your hat off at the end of the day. This coaching staff came in very, you know, overlooked. They're very young. They were looked at as, you know, yes men, and they're the ones knocking down the door and not giving a damn who's behind it.
Yeah, there was a lot being made about Jonathan Gannon last season, and rightfully so. I would not give Gannon a positive grade for last season's performance, but the one thing that you constantly heard was, you know, personnel. He doesn't have the right personnel for the system. He doesn't have talented enough personnel for his system. You add in, you know, a litany of talented players to the defense, you see things start to change. You replace Steve Nelson with James Bradbury. You bring in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in at safety over, you know, Rodney McLeod, who was serviceable last year, but more importantly, over Anthony Harris. You know, you bring in Hassan Reddick on the outside, on the edge. You know, these players allow Gannon to run his defense more so the way that he wishes to. And while early on, you see some things you don't like to see, like Reddick dropping back into pass coverage, I don't know that that's ever going to fully go away, but you're going to see it should.
It just needs to leave.
But I think in his mind, it's, you know, we don't want to, like if they line him up as a linebacker, you know, off the line of scrimmage, and you're not dropping him into pass coverage, what are you doing with Reddick? You're blitzing, right? So you don't necessarily want to give that away. And I think it's a situation of Gannon kind of outsmarting himself in that regard. But that aside, this is praising Gannon. He's done a great job so far, especially last week. You know, we saw the secondary play phenomenal ball for the second week in a row. On top of that, the front four got pressure.
Yes.
That's been the big thing for far too long, is that the front four needs to do more.
9
Damn
sacks.
it, they did it this past Sunday.
9 sacks. Granted, it's against Carson Wentz, who holds the ball for way too long, longer than any
quarterback. That's like 5 sacks against a regular quarterback. I mean, that's still pretty good.
That's fair. You know? That is very fair. But I mean, usually we put out every Sunday, you know, the Flippin the Birds player of the game. We missed it this Sunday. I was out of commission. Zach was out of commission. Eric was out of commission. Morgan is sick. So I mean, we might as well just say it on the podcast. Like, and I know you want to speak more about it, but Brandon Graham, coming off an Achilles injury where, you know, not only that, he's of the age where, you know, he should be going downhill. The guy's like a walking ball of energy on this defensive line, and is matching Josh Sweat, is matching Hassan Reddick. It's everything you need at the edge. And on top of that, he's a leader. Like, I'm so happy to have him back. Like, this was, know, it's phenomenal to see him, you know, playing the way he's playing right now.
Can you believe he was almost a New York Giant a few years ago?
Well, I need to hear this one.
When he it was when he would have signed, I guess it was his last contract, but shortly after the Super Bowl, I believe. But when Brandon Graham, he was not a surety to come back to Philadelphia, and the team, the leader in the clubhouse, to sign him were the New York Giants.
Really? So, I thought it was Detroit. I feel like everybody was saying Detroit. Wow.
New York Giants. Yeah. It was, and to the point where we started, you know, kind of sweating a little bit that BG was going to be in Big Blue. You know?
God.
So here we are now. That never happened. He is here. He's Philadelphia through and through. 34 years young, cheering on the sidelines, losing his head. It's not just that off the court. It's not that, you know, off the field, rather. Not that, not just the fact that he's a tremendous leader, but the fact that he's performing. You know, they talked about it on the broadcast on Sunday, but he's saying that he feels a quicker burst now than he ever has. You know, he has more agility than he ever, you know, perhaps he ever has had during his career after this Achilles, which is something that doesn't happen for people north of 30 that often. So
not at all.
Absolutely incredible for him to have. Here's the list, right? 6 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, pass deflected, a forced fumble, all of that in one game by 34-year-old Brandon Graham coming off of an Achilles tear. That's insane.
I mean, it helps that his motivation was his old quarterback, who I'm pretty sure that defensive line really wanted to just rock. Like, there's something. there's something that's not being said
yeah.
about this whole Carson Wentz and Eagles
Yeah.
situation that the players are really holding their tongue, but they
Yeah.
showed it. Like Fletcher Cox, even though that he said as his, one of his closest friends, he showed it. BG showed it. Like they wanted Carson. They wanted all of Carson.
Well, I think that, that friendship might even be part of it, to be honest with you. We saw Fletcher and Carson getting real cozy before the game started, and then Fletch just let loose, as the game progressed. So I think that there's that factor with true competitive people. It is not, oh, that's one of my, good friends. I'm going to take it easy on him. It's, oh, that's one of my good friends. Oh, I'm going to kill him. Like even more so, I'm going to go after that person. And I think that you might have seen a little bit of that with Brandon Graham, with Fletcher Cox in particular. So yeah, there was that extra motivation because it is Carson Wentz. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know whether any of it was malicious, if all of it was good, friendly fun, or what. All I know is clear as day that there was absolutely motivation because it was Carson Wentz, and it absolutely helped. And it absolutely helped that Washington's offensive line was working like a turnstile. But even still, great performance by the front four. Absolutely fantastic. Reddick got in there, Sweat got in there, Cox, Hargett. Jordan Davis started off the game incredibly hot. It just really, you go down the line, everybody performed phenomenally. You couldn't ask for a better start.
And just seeing like the collective, just the collective unit as a whole, like the way they're just working off each other, like this screams a lot about 2017, where it was just about the camaraderie, it was about the chemistry, it was about playing for your brothers, next man up. But like, and I hate to compare the Super Bowl year, but just because there's so much more flavor to this team. Like, you have the youth factor, you have the youth factor in the coaching staff, you have the underdog, the true underdog mentality of this team. Like this team has been counted out for the past 2 seasons. Even with this season, like people are saying like, yeah, they beat Kirk Cousins. Yes, they beat a Vikings team that everybody was screaming Super Bowl about because Justin Jefferson was wreaking havoc against the Green Bay Packers. Oh, they beat Carson Wentz. Yes. The same Carson Wentz that everybody was raving about, that was having a resurgence because Curtis Samuels was catching everything. And then the Detroit Lions, correct me if I'm wrong, they're averaging almost like 30 points a game right now.
Yeah.
I mean, football is literally a week-to-week, sport.
Yeah.
Anything happen every week. So for the fact that the Eagles are holding the fort down 3-0, it's phenomenal to see, especially with this defense actually looking like they can actually stop anybody. And it's great to finally see that, especially with the secondary. I mean, I've been praising James Bradbury since the signing. I want to see this man get extended. Darius Slay's, it's just looking like he doesn't age. And then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the guy's everywhere, literally everywhere.
Yeah, absolute beast. Love Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Hopefully he can stay past the season. That's going to be one of those tricky off-season decisions for Howie Roseman to make, is because he's going after top-tier safety money. We know that. That's the whole reason he's in Philadelphia in the first place. But so Alex says that he wishes that they'd switch up the D, do some stunts, put 7 in the box, walk the safety down back and forth, go from a 3-4 to a 43, tossing in the old 46D, right? So I definitely hear the essence of this. We've heard about Jonathan Gannon not having a scheme, and once we got back, past the initial chuckles of, well, he doesn't have a defensive scheme, it became a little more clear what he meant, is that he intends to be able to switch it up a bit. Whether you're running a 34, a 43, a 5-2, whatever the case may be. I don't know that you have had to do that against their competition so far. So I definitely understand the desire to see it, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't want to see some real creative defensive fronts as well. But against Washington in the state that they were last Sunday, it definitely wasn't needed. Against Minnesota, didn't really look like it was needed. Week 1 against Detroit, that's week 1. That's right. That's not really the time to. That's be doing the fourth
preseason
like
game, pretty much.
Exactly. So who knows? Against Jacksonville, could be the perfect time to see some of that stuff. Trevor Lawrence is. And we'll get more onto this a little later on. He's not a real gunslinger of a back. They like to work the real short and intermediate sections of the field. So I feel like we're going to see something a little bit different as opposed to what they did against Carson Wentz and Kirk Cousins, guys who like to air it out a little bit more. But, we've talked a lot about the Eagles defense and how great they were. And they really were great from the top to the bottom. Let's talk about this offense, though, because there was some pretty impressive showing, starting with who else but Jalen Hurts.
I agree. And it's funny because I'm reserved when talking about the offense this week. Just because yes, they put up 24 points. It all came in
Hell of a
one
second
quarter.
quarter.
Yes, it all came in one quarter, and
Yeah.
that's my. It's weird because it's a fear, but it's also shouldn't be a fear. It's a fear because they didn't score at all in the second half. They moved the ball, but they couldn't execute. And this is the second game in a row that this is haunting them. But the good thing is, like, hey, they didn't really have to because the defense was doing the majority of the job. I would expect that, the other opposing offense had the ball, longer than the Eagles did in the second half. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it's ideal. But my fear again is like they're starting off hot. They're starting off really hot. But like, why is that not carrying over into the second half? Even against Detroit, like I think we spoke about it last week where they need to have that killer instinct. They got to put their foot on the throat of their opponents and just keep going. Just don't stop until the game is completely over. But as Jay Fitzel is actually saying right now, it's wild that a few years ago we hated how slow they started, and now we want them to figure it out in the second half of games. But my thing is like, I just want to complete. I don't want them to fall apart in the second half against a good team. We're facing Green Bay this year. If they start off hot, they're up 24-10. Aaron Rodgers is slinging in the second half, but the Eagles are not scoring. The complaint's going to be like, why is this team in week 10 or whatever, whenever it is they face Green Bay, why are they not finishing games? So my thing is they got to nip it in the bud beforehand. You got to take care of these flaws before you actually face a formidable opponent. But other than that, like, I love the confidence that Jalen Hurts has right now. I feel like it's second to none. He's slinging it. He's putting the ball right where it needs to be placed, which is, it's night and day compared to what he did last season. But it shows like, this kid's work ethic is really paying off. His confidence is at an all-time high. He deserves to be, in conversations with anybody that's considered to be an MVP this season. And if you could keep it going, like, I don't know, like, I feel like Jalen Hurts is literally the baby of Donovan McNabb, Randall Cunningham, and Michael Vick all in one. Like, it just screams like nostalgia of Eagles history. Like, I love what he's doing right now.
Yeah, the perfect picture of three of the best quarterbacks that Philadelphia has ever seen, or the potential to be the perfect picture, I should say. But it really is interesting when you talk about the offense, and this is a little bit frightening. But so Jay Echo says, the Birds have had a pretty easy schedule so far. It's kind of going to be the case for the whole year. But yes, especially these first 3 weeks, it has been a relatively light schedule. We didn't play the Bills like Miami did, of course. Jay wants to see them in a one possession game in the second half. I want to see that scenario, sure, before we get to like Green Bay. I'm not too sure if we do see that within the next few weeks. However, with that being said, some of the upcoming matchups are going to be a little more challenging. Jacksonville is a much better team than they were expected to be, than they were last year. Really just under Doug Pederson, it's like night and day for them. I guess it shows that he does know something about what he's doing after all. But when you go and you look at, some of the matchups thereafter, well, we're going up against Arizona. And are they a perfect team? No, but that's definitely going to be one of the more difficult matchups, at least compared to, say, how things were against Washington or Minnesota. So I think it's really just kind of a opportunity to go from kind of weak competition to that intermediate. And then it's all just about improving week over week. The Eagles cannot continue not scoring in the second half for the rest of the entire season, obviously. However, I don't need to see them put up 30 in the second half next week. It'd be great, but if you are taking your time to make sure things are done right, it depends on the reason behind it. It's not because you can't, but it's because you won't. I understand that to a degree. It's not how I would want the team to be, but it's not the biggest of deals.
Correct, and that's why I said like it's not a bad thing because hey, the defense is keeping the other team out of the game. The defense is giving the offense this much of a leeway to close out a game, and it's great to see that. But at the end of the day, like to me, like I want to see what we saw against the Chargers last season. Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert going at it, literally drive by drive, and it ended up the Chargers winning just because of a freaking field goal. I need to see that because we saw Jalen Hurts play phenomenal second half football against the Chargers. We saw him go literally toe to toe with Justin Herbert, who's considered one of the top quarterbacks in the game right now. I think in my opinion, if he's in that position, I I would put my money on the Eagles winning that game just because they have AJ Brown. They have a better offense. They have a more potent offense. I mean, who's really going to double team AJ Brown and leave Devontae Smith or Quez Watkins open? But I just need to see with my own eyes and see, like, hey, they have this in the bag. Like, they're going to be a really good team come playoff time.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it too, you mentioned time of possession earlier. I just kind of want to bring that back for a second because first of all, Washington, they did win the time of possession battle by 5 minutes over Philadelphia last game. It's like a little shocking when you see how Philadelphia dominated the game, but if you think about it, a lot of big plays for Philadelphia as opposed to Washington, who
on and off the
had
field
to kind of grind it out as much as they could each and every time. So kind of on the part, the time of possession note and a little bit on the second half offense, the running game has performed well in weeks 1 and 2. Week 3, we saw a little bit of a slowdown, and it kind of looked as though it's not as far along as we thought. Not that it's a bad running game, just that it's not the number one rushing offense, that we were last year. And it's not going to be. It's a different scheme. Jalen Hurts is throwing a lot more. But even behind the great offensive line, it just looked like the same, not even the same. Forget last year. A top tier rushing attack was not what Philadelphia was presenting. So is that a matter of, it was just an off week? Washington does have a talented front four, so that could definitely be a factor into things. Or is this one of those things where, there's one piece missing? There's a like a Jay Ajayi sized hole in this Eagles team. And that very well may be. That's something they're going to have to evaluate between now and the trade deadline. It's not something you necessarily want to rush into. That's how you get Kenny Golladay. But you want to make sure that it's something, that you are aware of. You can't be blind to it at the same time. So I think it's something that Howe has kept his eye on. I think it's something that could be the key to becoming a truly dominant offense all the time instead of just for a quarter or just for a half. But it definitely is something that needs to be solved one way or another, whether that's the play calling, whether that's adding more talent, whatever the case may be. I do think it needs to be addressed. And I think by adding a quality back, wearing down the defenses even more by improving the running game, that's one way to do it. It's just, it might be a little premature. We might just have to kind of wait and see, try out a couple things before we get to that point.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and I noticed that as well. I mean, the numbers they've been trending down since week 1. I mean, week 1, I think Miles Sanders had 96 yards, something like that. Week 2, 80 yards, and last week he had like 40 something yards. And what I'm noticing with Miles Sanders is he's running, and he's doing it again. He's running into the pile, like he's literally running into traffic. Boston Scott runs into traffic, but Boston Scott, I feel like he has a better build than Miles Sanders does, so he can run into traffic and actually push himself through a couple more yards. Kenny Gainwell, we've barely seen him, which is the weirdest thing because in week 1 he was heavily involved. We've barely seen him. My fear is I don't want this running game to be reliant on Jalen Hurts. The guy is he's doing really good as a passer right now. He's doing his thing. He's staying healthy. He's staying in the pocket. He's protecting himself. I don't want him to feel like he has to do everything. The moment he starts to feel like he has to do everything, that's it's going to cause stress on the body. It's going to cause stress on the mind, and that's the last thing you want to see. A player that's already in talks of probably getting an extension, talks of being the franchise quarterback. You don't want to see Jalen Hurts digress into Dak Prescott. You want to see him move forward into a Lamar Jackson or Justin Burrow. He has that potential to be that kind of player. So I agree with you. I feel like they need to find a dynamic running back. Whether it's you move Miles Sanders for a pick and you flip that pick to get somebody else. It doesn't have to be a star. It just has to be somebody that's efficient when running the ball, like Jay Ajayi was.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And Jay Fizzle's, asking outside of the obvious Kareem Hunt, who everybody is connected to the Eagles at every moment of every day, who would be a good trade option?
David Montgomery.
Alexander Mattison.
Oh, wow. 2 different names. Okay.
Okay. All right. You go first.
All right. So we got a couple minutes before our guest comes on. I'm saying David Montgomery just because he's a bigger back than Miles Sanders. He can take, pound for pound what the defense brings. Behind this offensive line, it screams a little bit of a mix between a Jay Ajayi and LeGarrette Blount. Plus, he's still young. My only issue with him is he's not injury free. He's a little injury prone at times, but I just feel like, if you mix him and Kenny Gainwell together, it could be a very, very spicy formula.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a lot of reason to like David Montgomery in theory, and it also kind of screams Jordan Howard in
Mhm.
a way, just because you're talking about trading for an off-injured running back from the Chicago Bears. You know, could he get right? Could the injury bug not be a problem? Yeah, that's absolutely likely. You know, we saw Jordan Howard look much improved. Maybe not quite his peak in Chicago, but it kind of per possession, he looked
Mhm.
fantastic in Philadelphia once he came over here. So it's definitely within the realm of possibility that the same thing can happen with David Montgomery. Excuse me. Uh, I don't love his game, but he's absolutely an upgrade. So it
Mhm.
depends on the cost for me. If it's a realistic price tag that's attached to him, sure, yeah, he can be worth a flyer depending on who else is available. But for me, I'm going to keep it in that same NFC North, and I'm going to go Alexander Madison, who we've
He's
heard the
getting it
trade rumors
started out
during the
now.
offseason. Well, yeah, Dalvin Cook is hurt, but Minnesota season's not going the way that they wanted it to.
Mhm.
Understand that they're 2-1, but they are a very weak 2-1. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So if they continue to look unimpressive, if losses pile up, I could definitely see a world where they kind of just cut their ties.
Can we just say
Again,
that the Eagles broke Justin Jefferson? Can we just, like, announce that real quick?
100%. They
Okay, cool.
absolutely did.
Just wanna
They want
clarify that.
100% they broke them because Detroit doesn't have corners like Philly does. So
No.
that's some leftover side effects,
Yeah, they broke him.
from the Philly game. So it's absolutely all Philadelphia's doing. So there's a couple names out there. So the Raiders have the worst
Oh, yes.
record in the entire league. Josh
Josh
Jacobs
Jacobs.
is a top tier target, but leave it to Howie Roseman to find a way to bring in a guy like him on, for what, a fourth round pick, something like that, which is like a little high for a running back at the deadline, but we've seen that
Mhm.
for quality players. JJ was a fourth round pick traded for, right?
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
Jacobs is a little bit more fresher because the Raiders are not
Yes.
really using him, and the Raiders don't
No.
really want him for some wild reason.
Yeah, I can't really figure it out, but there's a lot going on in Vegas that I can't really figure out at the moment. So, we'll see what happens. Jay Fizzle says Josh for a third. I'm going to play a little bit of hardball with Vegas before I give up a third,
They
for
get a
a running
conditional
back.
pick, right? Throw forth
You can do
depending on,
conditional. Yeah, I mean, games, or snaps played, would definitely be important because you want to be careful with Josh Jacobs, just because, like Miles Sanders,
Mhm.
like David Montgomery, injuries are a little bit of a concern there. So yeah, there is a chance there. One thing that I want to, pump over to real quick off the running back conversation. I just saw Alex bring this up here about where is Milton Williams. Just want to acknowledge, got hurt in the last
Yeah, he
game.
did.
He's limited. What do you know his current status for the game on Sunday?
They haven't mentioned it from what I've seen so far, but I know it was a knee issue. I believe it was a
Yeah.
knee or shoulder, so one of those 2. I mean, I know it's 2
Yeah.
different
So
body
if he's
parts, but who
limited, I would
knows?
assume that he's questionable,
Yeah.
So it's there's potential for him to play. He he's not there's a lot of players on this D line, for him not to have an overabundance of snaps, it's kind of put him almost in that same Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis category
Mhm.
where it's like these guys are young, practice is crucial for them.
Hey, I mean, the young players are actually getting the opportunity to actually develop, which
Yeah.
has not been a thing in Philly for God
Yes.
knows how long.
Absolutely, and it's much needed. So the injury aside, it really is going to be an opportunity for Williams to learn this season. I feel they've certainly not given up on him or anything like
Mhm.
that. It's
No, no, no.
just purely about development, from everything I understand.
I completely agree with that. So right now we're gonna kind of take it up a notch and actually talk about the Eagles and Jaguars matchup. And joining us on the podcast today is Ryan O'Blennis from Big Cat Country. How you doing, Ryan?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing well yourself?
Great.
Good to have you.
Happy to be here.
Excited for this Jaguars season so far. It's definitely, things are looking bright under Doug Pederson.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I did not expect this kind of performance early on from this team. They're a really young squad. I thought they'd definitely be improved under Peterson. He's an actual head coach compared to what they had last year in Urban Meyer. But he's kind of expedited the whole rebuilding process. So it's been exciting to watch so far, but it's still early. So we'll see what this team's made out of.
So I need to pick your brains. I mean, first and foremost, Jaguars, they go out this offseason, they pay Christian Kirk wild wide receiver money. Then they get I think they traded for Zay Jones, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They signed him as a free agent too.
Yeah. Oh, he's okay. So they signed him as well. And you still have Marvin Jones out there. I mean, to me, Zay Jones is looking like what everybody expected him to be. Christian Kirk is doing his thing. You do have a pretty good backfield in James Robinson, and I can never pronounce this guy. I have a thing with last names, Zach.
Travis Etienne, right?
Etienne? That's yeah.
Etienne.
I'm not good with last name. Okay. Yes, you have him as well. I mean, this Jaguars offense is looking like it can actually be night and day compared to what they were last season. Now I feel like you guys actually get a real test in facing a top defense in the league, where you have a secondary that's full of James Bradbury, Darius Slay, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. What are you expecting to see from the Jaguars offense this Sunday?
Yeah, so really, Trevor Lawrence, he struggled as a rookie last year. He didn't have a lot of talent around him. He had a coach debacle with that staff, and they kind of set him back for a while. This year under Pederson, you're kind of seeing him blossom into the star that he was promised to be so far. Like I said, it's still early, but what they're doing with Lawrence is kind of the short and intermediate pass game, keeping he's finding the holes in the zone. He's not taking a lot of shots downfield, and he's protecting the football. He's not turning it over. So, you have that. And, you mentioned the receivers. You got Marvin Jones, Zay Jones, and Christian Kirk, who have, been playing well. Then you have the backfield, of Robinson and Etienne, who are taking pressure off of Jacksonville. And, they've been a really efficient offense. I think they're 6th in the league in total yards per game right now. And what they're doing is just sustaining drives. They're not giving the ball away. They're first. The Jaguars are first in the league in turnover differential, +8, I believe, and that's been huge. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely been like you said, night and day this year compared to last year with an offense that could barely score or sustain drives. And because what they're doing with Lawrence is they're getting him out there, moving him in the pocket a bit where he's comfortable. And he's just really taking what the defenses are giving him. If you look at, his passing chart over the last couple of weeks, he's not taking a lot of risks and downfield shots, but he's moving the ball, sustaining drives and just keeping, everything, kind of level for this team and just commanding the offense.
Yeah, I think that really has there are so many factors I think at play into Trevor Lawrence's success. Like you spoke to, he's not taking those risks. They're working the short game, the intermediate game a little bit more. The offensive line has been fantastic for Jacksonville, and Doug Pederson has, I feel, kind of been the cohesive tape keeping everything together. But to speak about the offensive line, I mean, this is a unit where between weeks 2 and 3, there's been, I believe, just one penalty for the entire offensive line, and Lawrence has not been sacked. That's incredible. So to have an offensive line like that definitely helps with any quarterback and their confidence and stringing together any kind of consistency. But especially for a young one like Lawrence, if you could speak to, how do you feel this offensive line is really going to impact this game against Philadelphia, against a difficult to manage occasionally front four for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, honestly, I think that's the matchup to watch, right? I think the Eagles have 12 or 13 sacks this year, which is second in the league. And as you mentioned, the Jaguars haven't given up a sack in the last 2 games. They've only given up 2 on the season, which both came in the first game against the Commanders. And that's tied for the lowest in the league. And so, yeah, obviously all NFL games are pretty much won in the trenches, but that's going to be the key matchup here. On the outside, at tackles, Cam Robinson and Juwan Taylor have played really well. And Taylor is a guy who was kind of under a lot of scrutiny over the last couple of years. He had a lot of ups and downs. People wanted to maybe see Walker Little win that right tackle spot over Taylor, but he not only won that job in camp, he's been excelling. I don't believe he's allowed a single pressure all year, which is just amazing. And then, in the interior of the line, they went out and they signed Brandon Scherf at right guard. And, honestly, through 3 games, he's looking like his old all-pro self, really playing well. They got a young center, a rookie center, and Luke Fortner, and left guard and Ben Barge, who's his first year as a full-time starter, and they've had a little bit of ups and downs early, but they're these last couple of games they've really been playing well, and as a unit overall, as you mentioned, like that's been huge for the Jaguars, just being able to keep pressure off of Lawrence, and he's not getting sacked, he's not turning the ball over, and Doug Pederson mentioned it too. That starts with the offensive line and the protection. So yeah, that has been absolutely huge in the Jaguars' success so far. And that's also, like I said, going to be a key matchup that, I'll be watching for on Sunday is how the Eagles pass rushers do against this offensive line.
Now, Ryan, we all know Philly's not everybody's cup of tea. Philly's, doesn't have the greatest reputation. So our version of Doug Pederson is probably night and day to your version of Doug Pederson, just because I feel like in Philly, every person walking in the street had a previous career in a past life as an offensive or defensive coordinator, and they scrutinized everything for the Eagles.
Yeah, they certainly act like it.
But tell us, like, so far, what are you experiencing with Doug Pederson? Because yes, the man brought us to Super Bowl. We got to enjoy the Haagen-Dazs moments. We got to enjoy the Brett Favre and Packer, comparison when they did that. What have you experienced with Doug Pederson so far? Do you feel like, wow, like this is like, a breath of fresh air compared to, open bar and Urban Meyer?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like I said, I don't know how to say it other than the Jaguars have a real coach now. This is a guy who has won a Super Bowl, both as a player and a coach. So he knows what's
in his second season as a coach too.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, that year probably should have been Jaguars versus Eagles in the Super Bowl, but we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I mean, just the way his game plans, his schemes, the way that he has his teams bought in and believing, and he's changing the losing culture in Jacksonville. This has been a dormant franchise outside of that 2017 year. I mean, going back all the way to 2007, I think was the last year they made the playoffs. Before that, and it's just been losing season after losing season after losing season. So, I didn't go into this year with high expectations because this is still, like I said, a rebuilding team. And I'm still, on the fence about how I think this team might finish. So we're only 3 weeks in. There's a lot of football to be played. There's a million different ways this thing can go wrong. But the way he has his team playing, the way he has the guys believing that, they're built to win. Now, this is a young team, but they're really confident. They're not ready to, they're willing to compete with anybody. They're not going to back down from any team. And, I think this week with the Eagles is going to be the real big test, right? The Eagles are 3-0, probably the best team in the NFC, maybe one of the best teams in the NFL. So, I think we're really going to see where we stand. But yeah, so far, I'm a big fan of Pederson, and many Jaguars fans, I think, feel the same way. It's just, still, like I said, a little bit of wait and see, but you have to be impressed with the results so far.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think the things that he's done in Jacksonville, I mean, it's not that hard to look improved over Urban Meyer. But even that aside, Pederson's done clearly a fantastic job with the team. And his arrival, coming home to Philadelphia, in a sense, there's been conversations about, how that's going to be handled, everything such as that, whether or not he will have a standing ovation, should he have a standing ovation. Personally, I'm of the mindset that yes, absolutely, he should. I mean, he's the first head coach to bring a Super Bowl to Philadelphia. And he had his quirks, but so does Nick Sirianni. Quirks aren't necessarily a bad thing. How do you feel that trip back to Philadelphia may or may not affect him this Sunday? Are you worried at all about any potential loss of focus, or is he just locked in and ready to go?
I think that he'll be locked in and ready to go, but at the same time, how can it not be super emotional for him? Like obviously the Super Bowl and then the way that things kind of ended there for him in Philadelphia. Like, obviously there's going to be a lot of mixed feelings there. My understanding from the Eagles fans and writers and stuff that I've talked to is that he's still pretty beloved in that city. So I would agree with you that he's going to get a warm reception there. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that, is going to affect his focus or performance or anything on Sunday. But I do think, before and after the game, there's going to be a lot of feelings there, and how could there not be? But During the game, yeah, it's not a concern for me. I don't think he's going to let that affect him.
See, I would think it's not gonna affect him if there was not an actual statue of him outside of the stadium. And I saw the clip of him not actually seeing the statue yet. I'm highly offended by that because I saw the statue and it's like, I'm not a fan of the statue because I feel like it's one Super Bowl guy. It's like, we didn't have to treat him like Vince Lombardi. Granted. But being back in Philadelphia, I want to get your opinion on this. Who do you think has the advantage? I mean, a lot of defensive players are still here from when he was a coach. And a lot of the offensive linemen are still here as well from when he was a coach. Him coming into this new this new era of Philadelphia, do you feel like Doug Pederson has it, possible upper hand because he knows how the players are working, or does Philly have the upper hand because they know how their old coach is going to throw the ball and actually defend the ball?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a good point. I think Peterson's going to be coming into the game, knowing, like you said, quite a few of those players there. Obviously, it's a different team since he's been there, and there's a lot of new guys, not completely new coaching staff. And, I think that there are advantages and disadvantages for both teams and players, right? I think that, Peterson's going to be coming in there with a game plan that he knows, what work, he knows the strengths and weaknesses of that team and a lot of what it's going to take to win and lose that game. I think the Eagles, on the other hand, are, like I said, one of the better football teams in the NFL, and they're going to be prepared. And some of those guys know Peterson's tendency and what he likes to call too. So I don't necessarily see it as an advantage one way or the other, but I do think that it can, it's definitely going to play a factor, and it'll be an interesting kind of chess match there between the coaching staffs and the players. So. Yeah, I think that's definitely something to consider, but I think, I'd call that kind of a stalemate.
Yeah, Ryan, this Jaguars defense is they're not only impressive, but a lot of the players are young, which really bodes well for the future. But when you look at some of the players, obviously there's first round picks from this season, Travon Walker. In addition, you have linebacker Devin Lloyd. Pairing them with Andrew Cisco, Tyson Campbell, all these young guys that are starting. I guess what I should say is, who out of those young guys do you think is the player to watch? Obviously, we know Josh Allen is a beast, and he's going to get his on Sunday. But out of that group of young players, who do you think Philadelphia fans are going to want to watch out for and be careful of the most? Who should the Eagles be most wary of?
Devin Lloyd has actually been the rookie who I'd say is most impressive. And don't get me wrong, Travon Walker's been awesome too. I kind of expected Walker to come in and be really raw as a pass rusher, take some time to develop. He's an athletic freak. He has all the traits. He seems more like a long project. That honestly hasn't been the case with him. He's been awesome from the get-go. Even when he's not in on sacks, and stops, he's causing havoc and opening up opportunities for other guys, and that includes Lloyd, who's just been fantastic. He's been causing turnovers, getting interceptions, just been always on the ball, making the tackles, and for a rookie to come in and play that well for both those two has been really impressive for me. And Josh Allen is another guy he's still young, but he's a team leader now for that, and especially for that unit. You pair those guys together with everything else that's been going on, and it's equated to the number one rushing defense so far in the NFL through 3 weeks. The Jaguars are only allowing 55 yards a game. So that's another key matchup to watch is Philly's rushing attack versus this rushing defense to really see if the Jaguars are for real though. But Lloyd and Walker have both really been standing out to me. But Lloyd is definitely, I'd say, everybody knows Walker's the number one pick. They'll probably be keeping an eye on him, and Philly might even be game planning around him more so. Watch out for Lloyd to be making a lot of plays on Sunday.
All right, Ryan. So we're gonna get a little spicy now. Okay, we're gonna talk. We're gonna talk numbers. We're gonna talk. Big game right now. Who do you feel for the Jaguars to win this matchup? What do you feel needs to go right, opposed to what do you feel could go wrong against this Eagles team?
As far as going right, I think the Jaguars just kind of need to stick to the game plan that they've been doing, where they've been taking what the defense gives them, keep the passes short and intermediate, but sustain drives. Don't turn the ball over as they've been doing. in the runs with Robinson and ETN to keep that Eagles front honest, but let Lawrence, kind of go to work. And on, what could go wrong is, where the Jaguars are kind of vulnerable is in the pass defense. I talked about how they have the top rushing defense, but passing yards are allowing something like 251 yards a game. And so, Jalen Hurts has been playing really well, and AJ Brown is obviously a lot to handle on the outside. The Jaguars have some good cornerbacks in Shaq Griffin and Tyson Campbell, who's just in his second year and has been playing, pretty well. Darius Williams and other guys too. The safeties, though, I think is where the Eagles might be able to exploit, kind of that defense. Rayshawn Jenkins has actually been playing a lot more solid this year than he did last year, but they're still susceptible to giving up plays in the middle of the field there. Andre Cisco, he's a young guy in his second year start. He's a full-time starter for the first year, and he can still make some mistakes. He's a ball hawk, especially in college. He liked to go for the ball, so he might take some gambles. So that's definitely where I think the Eagles might be able to take advantage. And defensively for the Jaguars, I think the best thing they can do is continue to kind of make the Eagles one-dimensional. Obviously, I think, like I said, the Eagles are going to win this game through the passing game anyway, regardless of how much success they have on the ground. But I think that they still need to be mixing in some runs with Miles Sanders, and even Jalen Hurts can be dangerous with his legs. To just kind of keep the Jaguars defense honest, because if they're able to hone in on that run, you saw what they did to Justin Herbert last week. He just and granted, Herbert was 100%. He was playing with the rib injury, but the way that this Jaguars defense has been playing the last couple of weeks, there's just been really impressive. So I think that that's got to be the game plan, is to not let the Eagles click on all cylinders in both, the run and the pass game. You got to limit one, and then you got to try to contain the other and hope that your offense can keep up with them.
So with that being said, I kind of want to pull back to Devin Lloyd, who we've talked about. He's been one of the more impressive players on this defense. Do you think the expectation is to, because he's a versatile guy, you see him play a lot in coverage. We know he has the 2 picks. However, if you wanted to improve Jacksonville's, rushing attack, or pass rush, I should say, he's athletic enough that you can theoretically send him, even though that hasn't been the calling card this year. Do you think that he's going to be more so kind of playing in that off pass coverage role, maybe a little bit of quarterback spy, limiting Jalen's run? Or do you think that they're going to try and maybe switch things up a bit and kind of create some extra pressure, try and pressure Hurts into making mistakes this upcoming week?
Yeah, we haven't seen a lot of that from Lloyd yet, blitzing the quarterback, and I don't necessarily think that'll be the game plan this week. I think they'll kind of stick to what they've been doing with him, where he's able to drop into coverage and he's able to defend the run well. I think if you see Hurts in the offense kind of carving out the Jaguars defense, then you might see some things where a defensive coordinator might try to switch things up and bring some extra pressure, maybe with Lloyd or somebody else. But I don't necessarily think that'll be their game plan going into it.
Okay, so before we get into score predictions, I want to do something different. Zach, forgive me for this. But I feel like, like, for example, like I love talking football. I love talking Eagles football. It's not my full-time job. I do it at 8:00 at night when my daughter is asleep and my wife is doing her thing, reading her books.
Right.
But I love it. I enjoy it, right? There's not, I think we can all agree it's not our full-time job, right? But I want to know, Ryan, like, before we give our score predictions, like, just tell the fans, like, what got you into talking about football? What started it for you, and to lead you to Big Cat Country. And I think you also cover Michigan State. Forgive me if I got it wrong.
Yeah, Michigan State. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, just tell us a little bit more about your journey, pretty much.
Yeah. So I don't do this as a full-time thing either, even though it often feels like I have 2 full-time jobs, because I have my job that has to pay the bills, and then I do this kind of around the clock, writing for the 2 sites and managing the Michigan State. But yeah, so it's funny. I do live in Michigan, so it's kind of, I get a lot of looks when people say, "Oh, you're a Jags fan? Why?" And it goes back to when I was like 10 years old and just getting into the NFL. My dad had this old, like, I don't know if you guys remember on the Super Nintendo Tecmo Bowl. And so the game was a few years old
Definitely.
already at that point. And that's how I learned about like the NFL teams and I was going through them and I just kind of randomly stopped on the Jaguars and was checking out like, their roster and their uniforms and stuff. I was like, these guys look cool. And after that I started playing that, I actually started watching. I started learning the roster, started following the Jaguars. Ever since then, I followed the team and I started covering them for Big Cat Country in 2017. I'm a staff writer for them and I cover, a lot of different aspects of the team from game recaps to, news and free agency and NFL draft and pretty much everything that's needed. So I've just been following them ever since I was a kid. And the Michigan stuff, I've been writing over at The Only Colors, which is another SB Nation site, also since 2017. I took over as managing editor there in 2020. We're a credentialed site, so I get to go to the Michigan State games or send my writers there, and we cover it in the press box, and I get to talk to the players and the coaches at the press conferences. And it's an opportunity that I'm very grateful for. Like I said, it's not a full-time thing for me. I'm getting more and more to the stage where it's becoming more of a passion where I'd like to make it more of a full-time thing. So for right now, I just kind of do it for the love of it, for fun, just for a little bit of extra cash, not much at all. But it's just, I'm a huge football fan through and through, and it's kind of a passion of mine.
Completely.
Well, Ryan, it
respect that.
really is. It's an awesome story, and
Mhm.
I really associated with it. Myself and actually our big boss man for PSN, Philly Sports Network, Liam Jenkins. We've discussed this many times, but the two of us also fell in love with sports through video games.
Oh yeah.
As a matter of fact, yeah, absolutely. So that was one of the first things that we connected on when we first got to know each other, and that's how a guy out in England, Liam, actually became a really big Eagles fan, and now runs an entire site devoted to Philadelphia sports. So it's just an interesting. A lot of people don't always think about how something as simple as like a handheld video game could kind of mold someone's life as the way it has for you, for Liam, for myself. But really, it's just part of the beauty, I think, of life and also of sports that it leads to such passion. And we're on that same desired track right now. As far as it's not what we do full time now. It will be someday. So I appreciate getting to hear you say that.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. We're all on kind of the same track there, and I really appreciate you guys asking me that, actually.
And it's funny because and I'm going to give him credit, because if I don't give him credit, he's gonna text me in the morning. But my old co-host Chris actually texted me and said, like, this would be a good idea to ask writers, what made them start. And just hearing your story, like, right there, you correlate with Zach's story. You get me? Like, so many people have this same burning passion where they want to do this. For me, it was kind of like I was talking sports all the time with my with my wife and my friends, and I couldn't shut up, and I got to a point where I just had to put it somewhere. You get me? But we all start somewhere, and we're all. I feel like art. Can I say this, Zach? The internet scouts are more passionate than the regular media guys. So to hear your story, I applaud it, but we got to the part where we need a score prediction now. This is an Eagles podcast. I need you to remember that, Ryan. All right.
This is where the gloves come off.
Philadelphia fans can be pretty brutal. So.
We got batteries on deck.
No, I don't see the Jaguars winning this game. I do think Philadelphia is one of the true contenders this year for a Super Bowl, and going on the road, it's going to be tough there, and like we talked about earlier, it's going to be emotional for Doug Pederson, and I think there's a lot of different factors that go into a game like this. But what I do think is that you're going to see a Jaguars team that's going to compete almost the entire game with this team. I think they're going to come up just short. I'm thinking a score prediction somewhere around like 28-21 with the Eagles winning. But I think what the Jaguars will be able to show if they can hang with a team like this, I think they're going to prove that we're for real this year. We're coming for the AFC South, which by the way is not a very tough division. If these first 3 weeks have shown us anything, so I like the Eagles to win this week. I think the Jags will keep it close. Maybe come close to covering the spread. But I just want to see a good game. I want to see the Jaguars kind of keep on the trajectory that we've seen them on so far to kind of, like I said, prove that, they can compete right now this year. So that'll be something that I'll be watching for. But I'll take the Eagles to win.
How you feeling, Zach?
I'm feeling pretty good. I think Jacksonville is very talented. I want to make that perfectly clear. They are an exciting young team, and I very much look forward to their future. That being said, they are coming into Philadelphia against, again, another talented Philadelphia Eagles team. So for me, I feel pretty confident in how the game is going to progress, and I'm thinking I'm going to hate giving this Eagles side of the score because it's going to be frustrating to hear that once again, the Philadelphia Eagles will score 24 points, but to the Jacksonville Jaguars 16.
Okay, that's fair game. Before I give my score prediction, I'm having a little wholesome moment here in the chat where Jay Tyler actually brought up the old Eagle stock videos that I used to do for PSN. So shout out to Jay for actually watching those. I didn't think many people watched that. But again, in week 1, the Eagles face a very scrappy team. There's lines, young team, very, very scrappy. I feel like it's the same thing with the Jacksonville Jaguars. On top of that, the old coach is on the other sideline. So it's going to be a feisty game. It's going to be you're facing a team that has a lot of potential. I'm a huge Zay Jones fan, not just because he's on my fantasy team, but because I feel like the kid has a lot of potential to begin with. And I'm curious to see what Trevor Lawrence does against a pretty solid defense. But I just feel like you can't really put your finger on the pulse of Jalen Hurts right now. Like the heartbeat is just pounding like at a abnormal rate right now. Where it's just like, how do you stop Jalen Hurts? You can't stop him if you block the pass because he can run. You can't stop the run because he can pass anymore. Like it's just so wild to have this kind of weapon. I am going Philly with this game, but I feel like it's going to be such a scrappy game. I'm going 35-32 Philly just because I feel like the second half is going to haunt the Eagles once again. If they don't find a way to buckle down, if they don't find a way to execute in the second half, I feel like Jacksonville and teams in the future can possibly take, wins away from Philly. But I am going 35-32. I think it's going to be an entertaining game. I think it's going to be an emotional game for a lot of people who are Doug Pederson stands. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. And I think Doug Pederson does shed a tear. And it's going to be Haagen-Dazs flavored vanilla, all right? It's not going to be no Rocky Road. It's not going to be anything, no birthday cakes. It's going to be vanilla, okay? Just pure. From the heart, from the soul.
If Dougie P is one thing, it is vanilla. And that's not a bad thing. That's part of his charm,
I feel like vanilla is just like, you can never get tired of vanilla. Like,
nothing wrong with vanilla.
There's literally nothing wrong with vanilla. Like, you just throw everything on vanilla, it just tastes amazing. If you throw like extra sprinkles on Rocky Road, it's just like a mess.
Thank you for calling them sprinkles, by the way. I appreciate that.
Wait, what are they called?
Well, what some people get a little extra and they start calling them Jimmys and whatnot, and it's I just blew Ryan's world by calling them Jimmys right now.
He's gonna go to the mall tomorrow, like, let me some Jimmys on my Rocky Road. Oh man, but Ryan, we appreciate you coming on. Also appreciate you for being flexible with us, and it's gonna be entertaining game. And hey, if the Eagles face the Jaguars in the Super Bowl or any time in the near future, maybe next season, we definitely love to have you on again to talk Eagles Jags. So definitely big shout out to you, and keep striving, keep doing everything that you're doing, and yeah, thank you again, man.
Yeah, I'd love to come back whenever you guys have me. Thank you for bringing me on.
Absolutely, brother. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys. So that was Ryan O'Blennis from Big Cat Country, giving us his Jaguars Eagles take. And Oh wow, that's a deep question, Broster. Do us Eagles fans shed a tear on Sunday? I can't I just can't
It
cry.
depends if they show. Oh, I bawled my eyes out at the Super Bowl when they won. So it depends on what, if any, type of.
Tribute.
It's not technically a tribute. Thank you. They have for Doug Pederson. You know what? But you can't really recreate that raw emotions a thing too. So
Mhm.
shed a tear might go a little, crack a smile. You know, just remembering. You know, the good old days, fond times. You know, I think we go that far. Shed a tear. If they lose, I probably shed a tear. That's not a happy tear.
Can I have an honest moment? I'm gonna have a very honest moment right now.
Let's do it.
I never really liked Doug Pederson. I'm appreciative, very appreciative, but Dougie P never struck it with me because I feel like his attitude at times used to really just rub me the wrong way. Like I like Nick because Nick, he paints portraits for you. Doug,
I
if you
guess
gave
you
him a
don't spend
brush,
enough time listening to Doc Rivers. It takes a lot for a coach to really
oh
grind
no,
on me.
Doc, I would never listen to Doug Rivers talk. I hate no. No, just no. Okay.
Doug Peterson's like a sweet old grandma, compared. So,
He's a sassy grandma. He's a sarcastic grandma. That's what Doug. Yeah,
he's really like, he's straight dad. He's straight like jorts and New Balance.
he's the dad of the girl that you're trying to date.
Exactly.
But he's that guy that's like, like you're not good enough, my daughter. I mean, which is all dads. No guy's good enough, my daughter. But
I mean, I think part of the thing is like he wasn't the biggest like X's and O's guy. Even like the Philly special that came out later that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that wasn't him. That
wasn't him.
That wasn't Nick. So like it he was the right personality manager for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's sometimes what a head coach is,
that's fair.
Well, it's always what a head coach is called to do. It's sometimes their pretty much sole responsibility, which was kind of the case for Doug Pederson. And
is Jay Fizz offended that I said that? People get a microphone, start talking crazy, Jay. Jay, if I gave you a microphone, you'd have a kangaroo in the podcast. What are you talking about right now?
He's still mad that we picked the Vikings in week 2. That's what it's all about.
Was I on that podcast?
I don't remember.
I don't know either.
It
Fizz,
was the
I need you to.
with the hair that he wanted to talk to, and I couldn't tell if that was. I assumed Eric because he's got the hair, whereas I just got the top hair. But
oh yes, I was not a part of that episode, and I was tweeting Jay back trying to figure out who he was talking about. But really quick before we end the pod, Tito says Doug Pederson is the greatest coach in Eagles franchise history.
No, Andy Reid is the greatest coach. Doug Pederson has the greatest accomplishment as an Eagles head coach.
Yes,
and I think that there is a difference, because when you look at the greatest coach, you have to look at the ways that they specifically impacted the game. And on top of that, longevity does also matter. So while Doug Pederson served his role, which I mentioned his role earlier, and he did that like to a T, like fantastic, perfectly. That role is frankly not as helpful, not as versatile as what Andy Reid did. Granted, it ended in a Super Bowl, but even still, just the Super Bowl alone, and I hate to say it, like it sounds crazy, how many years we were going crazy, Super Bowl, and I would, do anything for another one now, but you need the longevity. You need to. Andy Reid Big Red just impacted the game in more ways,
Yeah,
so
he had
those two factors,
a bigger fingerprint on the Eagles as a franchise.
Yes.
Dougie P had a bigger, in his time, he had a very good time with Philly. Yeah. And I'm very appreciative of Super Bowl, but putting Jimmy's on there is not going to do it for me for Doug Pederson. I'm sorry. Vanilla's vanilla right now.
As long as someone doesn't say Buddy Ryan, because like I get it was a fun team, but Buddy Ryan is definitely not. He's not top 2. We'll go that far.
Oh God! And the Kangaroos would have loved Doug. I'm pretty sure, Fizz, you're out of control tonight. I need you to relax yourself, okay? We picked the Eagles to win. All right, I said what I said. I need you to get over it, Fizz. Bro,
that's a good question.
Yeah, he's keeping us. Listen, I'm gonna get a divorce if I stay on this pod longer. Is Sirianni better than Doug if he wins us a ring? Yes, I'm gonna say
I'd have to look at everything, because here's the thing. So Sirianni is so very much like Doug Pederson in the sense. I think that there's more of an X's and O understanding with Sirianni than there is with Pederson. Obviously, Shane Steichen's calling plays. Sirianni is still very much a motivational leader type of head coach. That is his focus. With that being said,
I'm going to tell you, I can't wait to say, I'm going to tell you why Sirianni would be better if he wins this ring.
All right, because I'm leaning more towards Jay Fizzle saying equal, but I want to hear what you had to say.
So let's remember this. When Peterson came into the mold, the Eagles did everything they could to draft a franchise quarterback. They got Carson. 2016 was, they started off hot 3-0. Then they ended up, I think it was like 9-8 or 9 or something like that, 9-7, something like that.
Yeah, 9-7.
Okay.
9-7?
Was it 9-7?
Something like that. Something like that.
So they ended up like in that kind of record, right? Next year, they win a Super Bowl. Sirianni has taken this team from literally rebuilding, retooling, to actually contending in his second year. On top of that, they went to the playoffs in their first year with a quarterback that everybody considered, even the GM considered to be the backup of Carson Wentz at the time. They all said it. Like Jalen is supposed to be number 2. He wasn't supposed to be number 1. Sirianni literally developed this guy to be number 1. He literally developed a culture in Philly that's just, I feel like it's second to none right now. Like,
he developed the culture, but are we thinking that former wideout Nick Sirianni was the one who fixed Jalen Hurts' mechanics? Like,
no, absolutely not. But my thing
maybe
is,
he put the right people in place, but
Sirianni standing by Jalen Hurts and putting Jalen Hurts on a podium where it's kind of like, this is my guy, is enough to me. Where it's kind of like, okay, like, you're putting everything into this guy and you're trusting this guy enough to lead you to the promised land and actually lead you, allow your career to as a coach to continue as well. But it's different with Sirianni. Like, I explain it. Like,
I would probably lean towards a slight favor of Sirianni, because I do agree. Like, it is slightly different, and I don't see Sirianni leading this team into the doldrums that happened when Doug Pederson was overseeing the team. But that being said, I'm not too sure how many of those issues were exactly Pederson's fault. We know that he didn't really have it all together when we talked about picking an OC. But that being said, there was a Carson Wentz issue during Doug Pederson's tenure. That should be accounted for slightly when measuring Doug Pederson. And I feel that if he had Jalen Hurts from the get-go, somebody with Jalen Hurts's
mentality,
his mental buildup, I think that we're not saying some of the things that we say about Doug Pederson, honestly.
I think I agree with that.
And Jay Fizzle's right. I think there is some recency bias as well, but I think it's very, very close just because they're very similar in completely different ways. Like Doug Pederson, again, like I mentioned, like he's he's just that like happy dad kind of guy, whereas Nick Sirianni's like that. Nick Sirianni's like the teacher who kind of takes you under his wing, like I feel like school.
Nick Sirianni is literally like Mr. Miyagi. Doug Pederson.
Yeah, I was thinking the PE teacher, but yeah, Mr. Miyagi works too. Yeah,
Doug Pederson is kind of like I don't know why I'm forgetting the guy's name now from Cobra Kai.
No, come on. How much do you hate Doug Pederson?
No, not the villains. Johnny. That's Johnny, right? Johnny's the main guy.
Oh, so wait. So Nick Sirianni is
Nick Sirianni is Mr. Miyagi. Okay, you know what? Nick Sirianni is Daniel's son, and Doug Pederson is Johnny. That's the best way to say
Johnny
it, bro.
Lawrence for some reason.
That's how I feel about it. But serious question, right?
Yeah.
If Sirianni was the head coach when Carson was drafted in 2016, and Doug Pederson was the head coach replacing Sirianni, do you think Eagles win Super Bowl? And do you think Nick Sirianni actually is still coach, or do you think it's the same predicament?
So the Super Bowl factor is tough to answer because, of course, it is the Nick Foles factor. If Sirianni's coach, like that's the thing with these one-offs is that the ripple effects, like you can't really know. Like we don't know if Carson gets injured or not if Sirianni's the head coach.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. What I will say is that if Sirianni was here when Carson Wentz was first drafted, I don't know if some of the same concerns about Wentz continue. I feel that Sirianni would have, in the right way, been able to apply a little more pressure, that he needs to be a little more team focused than he obviously was, because that was clearly an issue. Here, he was a little cliquey. In addition to that, I just think that he'd be better at kind of reining him in as well. So while you probably would have had injury issues, continue with Carson, things like that, Sirianni may have just been a little bit better adept to handle that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Assuming we're talking about this Sirianni back then. But the point is, I do think that he would still be here, because by the end of it, it was a total shitstorm.
Oh, it was
by
bad.
the end of it, like,
It was
because
terrible.
Carson was failing the team, Doug Pederson was failing the team, Howie Roseman was failing the team, and it's
And
like,
how
all right,
the
well,
hell did Jim Schwartz get out of it early?
Jim Schwartz was failing the team, and so it just, I feel that, Jim Schwartz was fed up by the end of it. Doug Pederson was fed up by the end of it. Everybody was fed up. Carson, wanted to trade out, which Doug Pederson and Howie Roseman were more than okay with. Moved on from Jim Schwartz. Doug Pederson, I don't know if he kind of self-sabotaged himself. I've known some people in my life who have done things like to self-sabotage, like a job interview or something like that, and that's kind of how I imagine Doug Pederson's interview with or meeting rather with Laurie and Roseman, where he's taught his plan as far as who he to be the offensive coordinator and everything like that. Because that was the stupidest thing that I had heard. So he was clearly done as well. I think with not Shane Steichen, I think with Nick Sirianni, what would have been different is that I think he had more mental toughness, frankly. I think he's it's really like there's a little bit of, not that Pederson was as bad as Wentz as far as being mentally weak, but there are, I think, comparisons to Wentz and Pederson versus Sirianni and Hurts. They're both a little bit like their quarterbacks in the regards of mental toughness, where Sirianni, I think the guy's unflappable. Can he get like nervous sometimes? Like, sure, but you're never gonna have him just making like, what the heck are you doing kind of decisions, especially since we know he's not calling plays. So he was a fine depth signing.
It's always him.
It's always him. It's always him. I do really wonder how much of that like is Sirianni and how much of it's Jonathan Gannon going like, well, who do you want me to play? Who do you want me? So I don't know, but I do hope that Derek Barnett gets better and kills it for some other team. But it's in the end, I do like Sirianni's makeup a little bit better than Doug Pederson's, and so that's why
so much more structure.
It's like 51-49, but that's why I think I go Sirianni.
Okay, that's fair game. All right, well, yeah, guys. So we gave you a couple of minutes more to talk about Nick and Doug and Jay Fizzle's Forever Love of Kangaroos. But yeah, we'll be back next week, Tuesday night. I know we did Wednesday night the past couple weeks. There's been little things coming up here and there. I'm not answering no more questions, Broster. You're not gonna sucker me into this one. How you get a Hall of Fame ring? Do GMs
DM us? I don't know, but okay. I've not heard of that before. But DM us and we'll put it in a mailbag for next week.
Yes, we'll do that. Yes, Anyways, I'm Brian Cameron. He's Zach Chavalella.
Oh, just you gotta say it with the chest. Be confident, Chavalella. Right. Let it roll off the tongue.
So Chavalella.
There you go. You got it.
Okay, so I'm putting too much emphasis in the I think.
You're thinking about it too much. You got to think less. Like Doug Pederson, think less. Don't think as little as
think
he.
Think
less.
Think vanilla.
Exactly.
We're Flipping the Birds, and we'll be back next week at Tuesday, 8 p.m. Until then,
go Birds.
Yes, sir.